So turn in your Bibles to the Gospel of John. You'll find the Gospel of John where? Which, Old Testament or New Testament? New Testament. There you go. So I do encourage you to always bring your Bibles and be able to write in them and highlight, make notes, whatever the case may be. We do have those note papers in the bulletin as well that you can use. And so the Gospel of John, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The three synoptic Gospels are Matthew and Mark. The Gospel of John is just a little bit different, and we dive into that today. We kind of left it in at the end of the Advent season and our Christmas Eve seasons, where we talk about the light that comes into the world, and that Jesus was the Word, and the Word was with God, right? So this Jesus comes into the world to point to someone. Now, who do you think Jesus would point to? To God. To reveal the light and love of God for the world. So if we kind of pick up at Christmas time, we had God Emmanuel, we had Jesus was born, right? And then afterwards, the Magi showed up. Pastor Hannah captured that. And then in last Sunday, she covered the baptism of Jesus. So when we look at the liturgical year, we have the birth of Jesus. We have where then Jesus begins sort of his public ministry. And so you have the baptisms that occur in Matthew and Mark and Luke. And what's happening is it's the preparation of who Jesus is into his public ministry. And so here we have now in chapter 2, chapter 1 ends with Jesus calling his first disciples. So you could read in John in chapter 1, it's a lengthy chapter. You have John the Baptist in there, and then Jesus going around. He starts calling about 5 of his disciples. And he calls the one, Nathanael, he says, come. And he's like, well, how did you even know it was me? And Jesus says, well, you're gonna see greater things than these. Come and see. And so there's this invitation that Jesus has for us. Come and see what I'm about. Come and see what my teachings and ministry and life is going to be about. Now, I normally get excited if somebody invites me along, right, on a trip or on a journey. You want to know what's happening. A friend of mine called me up and said, hey, would you be interested in going to the Buckeyes game, the championship game down in Atlanta? That's a great invitation to have. And I was excited, but I just couldn't, it was going to be about 10 grand at a minimum by the time you buy tickets and hotels and travel down and all that. And I just didn't think that was a good use of our family's money at the time. Plus, I can just stay at home and relax in my recliner, right? So anyway, so we're being invited, we're getting on these things, but Jesus is inviting all of us on this journey to follow him. There's going to be its ups and downs. There's going to be where our expectations are exceeded. There's going to be where our expectations are not met. And there's going to be times where we're utterly disappointed. There's going to be times where we might even feel like abandoning Jesus. And so I'm kind of talking like what the disciples felt as they followed this Jesus. That really to be a disciple and to be Jesus and a cousin of Jesus wasn't really good for your life expectancy. John the Baptist was beheaded, right? Jesus was crucified. Most of the disciples were also martyred for their belief in Jesus. So here we have where when we follow Jesus as humans, as ones created in God's image, there's going to be a journey that we're on. And what happens is sometimes that gap between what we know or what we think or what we've been taught and then what we experience, well, that gap can cause us to ask questions, can cause us to challenge things. And then the other is sometimes we can pray and pray and pray to Jesus for years and years and years, and we just don't seem to get that answer that we've been praying about. And so we're wondering, does God even hear us? So that's a lot to carry around. You may not think about this much, but you're carrying everything I've talked about around with you. It's within your theology. You have a theology. You have a theo, God-ology, study of. You have this belief of God that you walk around with. You may not think about it every day, but what happens during your day is impacting your theology. Your theology sometimes impacts how you encounter the day and in other Christians. So, in other words, as you are on your spiritual journey, as you seek to grow, into more and more spiritual maturity, in other words, your will and the will of God starts to align more and more and more, there's some times where we need to let go of things. Now, when we talk about letting go in this whole sermon series of letting go, I am not talking about the simple platitude, the simple unhelpful saying of let go and let God, or just give it to God, right? Have you heard that? Maybe you've said that to somebody, but maybe you've probably had that said to you. Well, just let go and give it to God. Really? Well, because this thing that's really impacted my life and that I've been holding on to for so long, I'm just not sure I'm ready to let go of that. I'm not sure I know how to let go of that. Well, the problem is it's kind of harder to move through life if we're always holding on to things. Now, some things are good that we always have to hold on to, but if you're holding on to a lot that, well, it's life draining. And that's one of the things I want you to think of is what is life draining and life giving? What gives you life and what drains from life? Now, if I drink a bottle of water, that is life giving. But if I have to carry this heavy 40 bottle case around with me constantly, it's probably life draining, right? I'm not going to be able to run my 100-yard sprints in the morning while carrying this case. That's a joke. Case of water, right? But it gets the point of like it is hard to move when you're carrying that around. So we're going to learn about some steps that we can take in understanding who we are so that we can begin to let go of things in our life that are life draining. We can begin to let go of beliefs or hurts that are life draining. Because ultimately, as we see today too, you have to make a decision. Do I believe in Jesus? Do I believe in the goodness of Jesus? Do I believe in the one who can change water into wine? And if I believe in this Jesus and I believe in this God, then am I willing to give my whole self to who Jesus is? Great, so let's read chapter 2, Gospel of John. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. So this is about 2 days after chapter 1 ends. Jesus is called. They're in Cana. Cana is really an insignificant town, and they're in for a wedding. We don't know whose wedding it is, but they're in there, Cana, for a wedding. And the mother of Jesus was there. Now, who's the mother of Jesus? Are you sure about that? Who is it? Mary, right. John will never mention her by name. She's not going to be referred to again until when she's at the crucifixion, Golgotha, but never refers to her as Mary. So the mother of Jesus was there, and Jesus' disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." So real quickly, let's just go through there. So on the third day, they're at this wedding. The mother of Jesus was there. And when the wine gave out, the context of the wedding feast was this was a huge community social event. And drinking wine in antiquity was an everyday thing, and you needed to have wine there. And what would happen is when on the first day of the wedding feast, you would serve the better wine, right? Because everybody's like, "Oh, this is really good. Oh, thanks for having us. The wine's good. The food's good," right? Everybody recognizes that. Well, after a couple of days of feasting and being in that environment, your palates don't really recognize, is that really good wine? Or, as was the custom, they would start watering down the wine, right? So that it wasn't as expensive to keep feeding all the people that were there for the wedding feast. But to run out of wine is a huge embarrassment. You would not want to run out of this. So the mother said, "They have no wine." And Jesus says, "Woman," and this is not a term of rudeness or anything. In fact, we see this term woman used because Mary in the Gospel of John is really the archetypical type of woman for the world, kind of modeled after this Eve. "Woman, what concern is that of to you and me?" In other words, my hour, my eschatological time, the reason that why I'm here on this earth is not, it's not supposed to be happening yet. And I, Jesus, cannot be told by humans what to do, for I do the will of God in heaven. But his mother because mothers are just usually know what to do here. The mothers tell the servants, do whatever he tells you. So it's more than just saying, do whatever he tells you to those people right there. This is John's way of saying, this is a more of a cosmic declaration. Whatever Jesus says, you should do it. Whatever Jesus tells you, do that. If Jesus is talking to you, if you're hearing something in your prayer, if you're reading something in the Bible, and Jesus tells you to do something, then do it. Verse 6, now standing there were 6 stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification, to cleanse your dusty hands and feet, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus said to them, fill the jars with water, and they filled them to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the chief steward. This water became living water, and so they took it. And so here we have these bottles of waters, but then this water will, when the chief steward, the head guy, the one in charge of all the hospitality on behalf of the groom, on behalf of the wedding, when he tastes it, it will be the best wine ever. So verse 9, when the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now. Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him. So everybody had been partying, drinking, whatever, and we're going to cover some things here about how much you should be drinking or not. But in other words, the steward was like, wow, you are so generous to the bridegroom. You are so generous that you're giving the best stuff at this point in the feast. Expectations have been exceeded. So today's January 19th. It was 6 years ago in 2019 on January 20th that I covered this story before, this section of the Bible. 6 years ago, almost to the day, by Thursday of this week, my father would go into the hospital and a few days later die, sort of unexpected and very quickly. You see, life changes without really your permission. Life will happen. You always have to be ready. Who am I in Jesus Christ? Where am I in Jesus Christ? Do I have my salvation? Am I ready that when my life can dramatically turn, that I have a foundation in my belief and understanding of who God is to me, who God is to you? So I want to read to you from a little bit from Father Richard Rohr and understanding what it means to let go. Authentic spirituality is always on some level or in some way about letting go. Jesus said in John chapter 8, the truth will set you free. So our spirituality is always on some level or in some way about letting go. You cannot continue to learn about the love of Jesus Christ without letting go of some things that you thought you knew or you experienced. Think about what you knew as a 5-year-old or what you understood life to be like as a 13-year-old. If you still have some of those basic understandings, right? I mean, those change because you experience the world. You've got to let go of that and embrace something new. So Father Richard Rohr continues to write this. Once we see truly what is trapping us and keeping us from freedom, we should see the need to let it go. But in a consumer society, most of us have had no training in that direction. Rather, more is supposed to be better. True liberation is letting go of our false self, letting go of our cultural biases, and letting go of our fear of loss and death. Freedom is letting go of wanting more and better things. And it is letting go of our need to control and to manipulate God and others. It is even letting go of our need to know and our need to be right, which we only discover with maturity. Have any of you ever felt like you've manipulated God? How many of you prayed, Lord, just help me find a parking spot, I'm so late. Or Lord, just answer this prayer and I promise I'll always go to church again. Or I'll always do this, right? That's manipulation. It's a prayer, it's asking, but you're bargaining with God. Thankfully, God knows us better and loves us better than our manipulations. We become free as we let go of our three primary energy centers: our need for power and control, our need for safety and security, and our need for affection and esteem. Now, I'm going to come back to these from what the Reverend Steve Cuss writes in his book, The Expectation Gap, which we've covered before, but these really get into our 5 false needs of power, to always be right, to always be perfect, to always be everything for everybody, just to name a few. So as we become free, as we let go of our 3 primary energy centers, our need for power and control. So think about in your own life what you try to control, what you try to maintain power over, your need for safety and security. And this goes beyond security, a threat from like a physical intrusion into your life, but what you need to feel safe, like you've got it together, that you're ready for what's coming next. And then our need for affection and esteem. Everybody in here likes to be affirmed, right? Well, sometimes in our desire to be affirmed or esteemed or to get likes or to be noticed, we go into modes of which we can never fully achieve that. So this simple tripart distinction has been affirmed by many psychologists in many different ways and is also used by Father Thomas Keating in his understanding of the entrapment of the human person. Again, some spiritual fathers that we look to that can provide great advice on how we understand the writings and teachings of Jesus. So again, we're not talking about the simple, hey, let go and let God. I mean, does that ever work for you? Doesn't really work for me much. Now, I can say it quickly to remind myself, to be aware of God's presence, to remind myself like, hey, I'm trying to do more than I think I can, but I can't change water into wine. So like Mary, am I willing to go to the one who can do that? So letting go, and we remember this, if it matters to you, it matters to God. So 3 steps I want you to think about as we learn to let go. We're going to cover this over the next few weeks. So steps to letting go is you've got to name that issue or that problem, that thing that you're dealing with in your life. You have to name it. Now, most Americans, most of you, may not like dealing with what's going on in your life. We don't, because it's painful, it's awkward. A lot of us have not been trained to really dig into, this is an issue that kind of makes me a jerk to people. I try to hide it, but I really become overreactive and other people see it. You get my drift. So we got to name the issue. Steps to letting go involves prayer. Can I get a little bottle of water? Thanks. Second one is steps to letting go is prayer. Sounds obvious, right? What is prayer? Well, prayer is talking to God. But how many of you have said, well, I just feel so hesitant about praying for myself because I see that little kid with cancer. I see what that family's going through. I see they've lost their house. My need, it just seems insignificant to them. That is an idea that you need to let go of. And you need to value who you are and how God sees you. And that anything that's on your mind is probably also on the heart of God. If it comes up to you, if it matters to you, it also matters to God. Third step to letting go is building versus consumption. Building versus consumption. What would that mean? How many of you consume things? What do you consume every day? And does consuming build something in your life? Does it move you forward? I can consume a lot of content about building a log cabin, but if I never build a log cabin, all I'm doing is consuming. I can consume a lot of content which widens the gap between my relationship with God and myself. I can consume a lot of things, whether it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, reading, working too much, avoiding others, whatever it may be, you can consume all that, and it's not going to do anything to build what you want in your life or build and restore a relationship. So as we learn to let go, we're going to kind of come back to these three things. Can I name that issue? Can I pray about that issue? And then can I build and take steps towards that issue? All right. So again, Jesus calls Andrew, Peter, Simon, Philip, and Nathaniel all at the end of chapter 1, says, come and see. And so now they get to come and see what Jesus is doing, and we have to understand that here in this is the first for the Gospel of John, the setting of which he chooses this first of 7 signs which point to who Jesus is in God. That the family, that the relationships, that the community, that the abundance is there. That God is going to do new things to make things that seem impossible to become possible, and that God's abundance in your life can happen. But you have to believe it. You have to choose to follow. The disciples had to choose to do this, choose to see this. So, do you believe in Jesus? Now let's talk about the wine thing just real quick, give you little scriptural bookends. So, in Psalm 104, wine is a sign of prosperity and the blessings of God. But we don't want to drink too much wine, right? So drinking wine is symbolizing peace and prosperity. Psalm 104, verse 15. And drink wine to gladden the human heart, oil to make the face shine, and bread to strengthen the human heart. But excessive drinking and drunkenness were condemned. Proverbs 20, verse 1. Wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Right? We'd all agree to that. Too much drink can kind of make you into the person you don't really want to be. So this miracle story where Jesus takes 150 gallons of water and turns them into the best wine that's ever been had, we see this newness and possibilities that are out there. You have to start believing in and grasping in that this is the work of God in my life. This is more than just a Bible story about the past. This is who the gospel writer trying to portray God's love in the world, God who created you in the image of God, God who created all the cosmos, God who we celebrated as Emmanuel, Jesus Christ, comes to us and loves you so much that he comes in the form that we could recognize to walk amongst us, who would then be crucified to give grace and salvation for all people. Do you believe that if God is doing good things, then God can do good things in all situations? Now, don't make the mistake of thinking every single prayer gets answered in the way that you want it to be answered. Because there are certain ways in which the world is operating. One of those is death. Until we are all in heaven, until the kingdom of God, the reign of God is fully made manifest, there will be sin and death on the earth. You will die, I will die. And so it's a tough thing when our young ones experience one of you getting sick and one of you dying, and then they get mad at God. Because we don't take the time to have real conversations about the cycle of life and how God loves us and how God is with us in all these things. You have to talk with your young ones and especially your teenagers about when you are scared and when you are struggling, when you're dealing with anxiety, and how you go to the Lord in your prayers by naming what is wrong, praying to God about it, and then taking action and building instead of consuming about it. But if you never do that, then the young ones in middle school and high school just think, well, my parents always seem to get through it all right, but yet here's all these bad things that are happening. Things that we have to let go of and deal with. So, let's go back just real quick The three primary energy centers. Why do you get anxious? Why do you get nervous? Well, we have our need for power and control, our need for safety and security, and our need for affection and esteem. So those correlate to the 5 false needs by what the Reverend Steve Cuss talks about in his book, Dealing with Chronic Anxiety. 5 false needs. The needs to be in control. I'm not going to look at anybody, but how many of you have the need to be in control? Not looking at anybody, right? You know who you are. I know who I am. All of you are like, dude, you're the first one that loves to be, right? I got it. Perfection, right? We want to have everything done right all the time, perfection. Another false need, you feel like you need to know the answer. That if anybody comes to you about something, you know it, you've never been taken by surprise, you're not caught off guard, you know the answer. Being there for people. We get the Messiah complex. So I got to be everything to everybody and be there and take care of all these needs, and you run yourself ragged and burn yourself out. And then the last one is approval. Everybody's got to like me. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody that's come through these doors have liked me. You're not going to like everybody in your life. But this is a false need that we chase after, and then when we don't get it, well, then that creates anxiety in our life, and then we're overreactive, and then we're holding on to things, and we start doing things that are life-draining, that takes us away of being in relationship with God. You think about it, God is in control of the world. I'm not saying God scripts every little thing in your life, but God is in control of love and bringing things into the world. God is perfect. God knows the answers. God is there for everyone. And God loves everyone. So those things that we try to strive after because we try to be more than human, God's already got that covered. So think about this. What do you need to let go of? What do you need in your life, or what do you need to let go of? There's, things that we worry about, like healing, or maybe you're worried about being healed of a physical issue or emotional, mental, whatever it may be. Maybe you're dealing with your impatience or stress, questions that never seem to get answered. Maybe you struggle with trusting people. Maybe you're holding on to regret. Maybe you live a life of frustration. Maybe you have guilt. Maybe you carry items from the past. Maybe you have prejudices and avoidance issues. Maybe you're insecure. Maybe you're boastful, proud. Maybe you struggle with issues of self-esteem. Maybe you're sort of burnt out and apathetic in your approach to life, and you never used to be that way before. Maybe you're struggling with issues of feeling lazy, and you have negative thoughts, negative self-talk. Maybe you just have some ill, hateful feelings towards certain people. Maybe you struggle with anger. Maybe you've got a really strong, tough wall around your heart. Maybe you struggle with gambling. Maybe you struggle with leaving the bad stuff behind. Maybe you've had a separation of a relationship in your life or divorce in your life, and you're trying to figure out how to move ahead. Maybe you struggle with forgiveness or self-hate. Or maybe you deal with issues of being selfish or just a reluctance to live life. So these are issues that you have all named in your prayers and in your struggles with God. And so these are issues that we will learn. How do we start letting that go? And so, again, not all these may apply to you. Maybe a lot of them do apply to you, but you're going to figure out, what can I start letting go as I hear these words of Jesus in my life? Mary said, do whatever he tells you. And so we're going to look at those issues in our life, and we're going to pray to God about them, and then we're going to build, we're going to do, versus consume. Praise be to God.